This is Damian Perdue of Think Theory Radio, Saturdays at 6 p.m. You're listening to Hal Sparks' radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I thought there was going to be like a new one every break. I was so excited.
You want more, Hal? We'll give you more. Hal Sparks' radio program, Mega Worldwide on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820. Hoo-yah!
All right, so I have a map up on the thing. We talked yesterday on my show, and so if you watched yesterday morning, I'm sorry if we do a quick recap of things. But you've heard about all the noise going on in Kazakhstan, right, Johnny Million? Yeah. Okay. So the new president of Kazakhstan, who replaced the old guy who'd been there for 31 years, who's still running the place. He's just the head of the Security Council, as this, Russian-friendly state, has been, he doubled the price of fuel and caused all these protests. And these people are tired of being under Russia's thumb because even though they got their freedom from the USSR, they've sort of just been under softball control ever since. And this new president came in and started being sort of a proxy between China and Russia, trying to make nice between the two. And between the Belt Road Initiative and giving oil and gas to China, so that he could cut China a deal on oil and gas, he charged his own people more. So they got a little miffed. Largely because everybody's talking about how big the border between Ukraine and Russia is. Largely because it's big for Ukraine. It's not big for Russia. The Kazakhstan border with Russia and Kazakhstan is 6 times the size, and almost double the Kazakhstan border with China is that of the Russia and Ukraine. And on the Kazakh side of the Kazakh-Chinese border, there are hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs who and Turks who live up there, who are not big fans of what the Chinese have been doing to the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, namely murdering them, genocide, wiping them out, sterilizing them, rape camps, horrifying stuff on the level of stuff that we used to, we would point to. This is the reason why Iran and Iraq are just, like cesspools of the world, right? This was the thing, is that they would do these kind of things. China's doing this right now, and we're like, ooh, iPhone, right? There's a little bit of like, oh, you can have the Olympics. Super weird. Like you could tell that the world is having trouble detaching itself. It's not surprising. It's not going to happen all at once. We slowly stitched ourselves into human centipede versions of conjoined twins with the Chinese, and it's going to take a while business-wise to extract that. And it's already happening. I've talked about it many times on this show and on my live stream. We've gone over, even the, Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturing company is building a plant in Arizona just to hedge their bets with the American market.
Wow.
And it's one of the reasons why we've got ships with the Japanese and the Australians doing laps around Taiwan right now. We have American Marines on the beach in Taiwan training Taiwanese forces. And so but the big story is Ukraine, right? The Biden administration comes out this week and says that there's word on the street is that Russia might try a false flag. Along the lines of, Germany entering Poland, seizing the radio stations, and creating a false flag within the country that would, that Poland's planning to attack. We, the Polish people, will attack Germany tomorrow, right? On the radio station, so that the Germans could hear themselves say it over the airwaves and go, they're going to attack us. And then they use that as a precursor to fully invade Poland, right? Similar type of stuff. It's old school, been around for a long time, and there'll be no surprise that they would do this, right? The difference is that there's 175,000 troops and materials that are supposedly in and around the Ukrainian border now, and they're building it up, and they've done it multiple times. And Russia, before they invaded Georgia, before they invaded Crimea, did this thing where they build up, pull back, and build up, and pull back, and build up, and then go in. And everybody was like, by the third time, you're like, oh, they're just going to leave. And then they actually went for it. And the idea is that they want to claim this little extra piece of land, and even if they have to rescind, they're not going to pawn off the board each time, and eventually they'll make the push, which they're, quite frankly, not able to do. Because there is a whole hornet's nest of other stuff going on that Putin, in his flailing and silly attempt to sort of reassert the USSR as a concept, because supposedly he still thinks the breakup of the USSR was the worst thing that ever happened. And if you were if your country broke up, you'd probably think that. That's not weird for anyone. I ask any Russian, they might go, yeah, that's the worst thing that's ever happened to the world. Really? Okay. Since the separation of the continents, right? Anyways, so one of the things that's really sort of gone by the wayside, and Kazakhstan, you and I we're big Borat fans.
Oh, absolutely.
Sacha Baron Cohen is just a genius and is lovely. And if you haven't seen The Spy, by the way, which is a dramatic series he did, about a true story about an Israeli spy who, in the 60s. It's brutal and beautiful and really well done. And the filmmaking is quality. It's terrific. That most of us just think of it as kind of a funny goat herder state, like the Armenian character in Everything You Want to Know About Sex, but were afraid to ask, with Gene Wilder in the in the sheep sketch, right? I dream of Armenia, right? And my sheeps, and it gets lonely, right? That was the old joke about that kind of place. And Kazakhstan kind of fell into that, like the stories that he tells, based on this idea. And you forget that Kazakhstan, as a former, satellite country of the Soviet Union, as part of the Soviet Union, they have some sound infrastructure, big public works programs that they pushed for a very long time. Some of it went to crap after a while, but they really did, build some solid buildings. We're not talking about sort of like the Chinese palaces that they've been building, just, that are the quality of the inflatable tanks the Allies put on in World War II to try and get the Luftwaffe to think there was a there, right? So Kazakhstan is enormous. It's a giant country with a lot of oil and gas.
Until Borat, I thought it was made up.
Okay,
or after Borat.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I have a map if you check on the stream right now, and if you can see it right now. But it is.
That looks really big.
It's 3 times as big as Turkey. It's it's 4 times as big as Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, all these countries.
It's a pretty shade of green.
It's bigger landmass than Afghanistan. So the idea is that Biden's weak. And oh my God, Putin's laughing at him. That's what if you turn on Fox, if they bring up Putin, that's all they're talking about. He's pushing Ukraine.
Why do they root for the brutal dictator?
I think anything to root against.
Strength?
Well, I don't know. Maybe they like the fact that the average Russian wage is 1/6 the average American wage. Maybe that their economy is like smaller than California's. Maybe they like the fact that inflation there is approaching 10%, and that they jacked up. They like his monetary policy because he jacked up their interest rate a whole point in a month to fight inflation because he's a lunatic. Maybe that's what they like, or maybe they like the fact that they're big Republicans are big Second Amendment fans. So I'm sure they like the Russian gun rules, which is like you have to have a rifle license for 5 years before you can own a handgun, and they can take it away anytime they want. And you have to register how much ammunition you have. And if you go out with 9 bullets and come back with 8, you better have a shell casing. That kind of stuff. Freedom. Maybe that's what they like. Super weird. But one of the big things, and this is it's gonna ride into the next break because it's kind of a bit of a story.
Okay.
But Russia and Turkey have been, kind of buddies, like dictator to dictator. It's kind of a fun thing going on right now. And Erdogan, pictures himself as a strong man. The problem Putin has is that Turkey, while its economy is in the crapper right now because of COVID, because of its where it is and the resources it has access to, and a discovery it just made near Ukraine in the Black Sea, their loyalties have shifted almost like in the last year, but almost in a weekend. And we'll talk about that when we come back after the break, because it's really fascinating. And I found, I was diving into this all weekend after we talked about Kazakhstan on my live stream, and I've just been fascinated by it. And it's really a huge turn. And anybody who's selling this Putin's laughing all the way to the bank idea right now is insane. You're a crazy person. Just stop. Just stop. Even if just to be awful, don't cheerlead him. But also, you're drunk. You're drunk on dumb. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I've had people walk out of me before, but not when I was being so charming.
Video streaming at halsparks.com.
I don't care for you or for the putrid sludge you're troweling out.
Plus faithful pimp stick.
True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
Johnny, full disclosure, my knowledge of the the areas around the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea and Turkey and Ukraine and Istanbul and Sevastopol and all these places in the mid 90s was based largely on the movie The World Is Not Enough.
Oh, lovely.
Because for the record, I am a huge fan of the Pierce Brosnan years. I'm staying there, and an enormous, a bulletproof crush on Sophie Marceau. Just brutal. She's so good in it, and it's classic Bond, and I like it, and just I'm sticking to it. I enjoy Daniel Craig's turn as it. I call it the Bond identity because it was much more like the Bourne storylines and style. But whatever, do what you got to do. It's fine. Went out with a whimper. I was not a fan, but that movie introduced me. The World's Not Enough to the idea that there were Russian and Armenian pipeline deals going on in there because that's part of the big storyline, and that somebody was going to blow up a nuke to try and get these two countries fighting so they could take the oil and gas rights to get a pipeline through, so that the only pipeline would be the one that they had, which is always a concern there, has been going on for a long time, and they just decided this would be a good plot line. This happens. This is a danger in the world, right? You take something that's 10 people over the time have tried to destroy the Panama Canal, right? And okay, let's do a movie about somebody trying to upend the Panama Canal so that they can control shipping routes for the next 20 years, that kind of stuff. Billions of dollars, why wouldn't you? Evil organization, yada, yada. So, famously, Turkey and Russia have been getting along for a very long time. But while Russia has this idea of, and Putin supposedly got this idea of bringing back the USSR, that he wants to turn it, get all these countries back. He wants Ukraine, Lithuania, Latvia, Kazakhstan, all these things back in the fold, mainly so he can have access to those resources without having to negotiate with anybody or put an oligarch in place, because it's a lot of work threatening these guys and throwing bags over their heads. It's a lot of work. Meanwhile, the Turks have been kind of on board with all this stuff, except for that whole, momentary thing with Syria, which Russia has been kind of encircling them with the bases that Trump gave them of ours in Syria, while he let them clear out, he let Turkey and Syria just clear out the area of the people who've been helping us, the Kurds in those areas. Turkey's been trying to separate the Iraqi Kurds and the Syrian Kurds, kind of just push them off into these territories, make them the other country's problem, because they want Turkey would be for the Turks, right? Just to be, sort of racially homogenize the country, which is always a problem historically.
You can't
Great for
make
tourism.
Turkey just for the Turks.
No, you can't. So why then, what's the big shift that's happened in the last little bit? So as the Ukrainian buildup has happened, when Crimea was taken and Georgia was taken, Georgia is, by the way, Georgia is the only piece of land between Turkey. I've got it up here on the map, between Turkey and Russia. And Russia taking Georgia is knocking on Turkey's door. And a lot of these guys, even though the world has largely moved on, the economic structures of the world and the resource shipping and all this other stuff, these guys are still operating like we need farmland and we're going to take it from you and it'll still be arable after we pepper it with mines or something. It's silly. I mean, it's warlike adventurism from people who are living 5 decades in the past. But in those areas, in some ways, in the military especially, they haven't moved on. They have not advanced. Russia hasn't innovated in any area except the space program since 1975. Like nukes, rockets, and the occasional space transport. That's it. You don't own a Russian television. You don't own a Russian toaster, more than likely. They got nothing. And it's oil and gas right now. And what they have with the oil and gas problem is they have their leadership siphoning off the top, making themselves, fat and happy, while the people go through rough times all the time. And right now they have a heating oil problem and an inflation problem and a supply chain problem, just like everywhere else in the world, but no desire to actually fix it except to keep themselves in power. And that's very weird. That's different than our system, as much as people would like to think we're a mess. Okay, so Black Sea. Ukraine is right across, and I'm pointing this on the map. Ukraine is right across the Black Sea from Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
And Sevastopol, this little, and the Sea of Azov is this little section of land that, Russia uses to try and get through this little lane. Bring their oil through from the Sea of Azov into the Black Sea to get it, to market and through other things. And then they take it through Georgia. They're friendly with Azerbaijan. They get the Caspian Sea. They can get it to, they can sell it to Iran. They can get it into, whatever. It's a lot of, there's a lot of back and forth. But the point is, they need that little lane. Well, Turkey, in cooperation with Ukraine, has discovered an enormous natural gas deposit off of Sevastopol in the water underneath, like getting it from underneath the Black Sea. And Ukraine allowing them to port there, which the Russians would not do. The Russians would take it for themselves. The Ukrainians allowing the Turks to get that gas, which they are financially screwed right now, and they desperately need, has suddenly made them fast friends with Ukraine. And so how did they handle this? What does that work out to be? Ukraine has started getting drones from Turkey, and not just aerial surveillance drones. Effectively, their version of a Predator drone. Turkey has gone in the last 20 years from being the 3rd biggest importer of arms in Eastern Europe to the 14th biggest exporter of arms on Earth.
Wow.
In the last 20 years. This is an industry for them in that area. And part of the reason was because we were buying a bunch of stuff, to supply the Afghans. When we didn't want to give them our gear, we bought gear from Turkey and gave them Turkish gear. That's that $83 billion worth of stuff that we left behind. That was, by the way, that number is all the training and all the materials and paper, Xerox machines, everything like that, and weaponry that we gave to the Afghans and trained them with over 20 years. I don't know why anybody thinks it's a flex when Trump's like, we left $83 billion worth of stuff there. Wait a minute. Did you dump $83 billion worth of stuff there in your last year in office? Because that's the only way there's $83 billion worth of American gear in Afghanistan for the Taliban to seize is if Trump gave it to him in his final year in office, because it wasn't there. I mean, Obama famously twice was extracting us from areas, and we blew up all kinds of stuff. There was footage and stories. There was literally the Afghan scrap guys were angry because we were blowing the stuff up too well. There was no usable parts. They're like, dude, you're just sending me shredded metal. At least leave armor plates that are at least a foot by a foot so we can make something out of it. You know, there's literally stories in the news about this. But all of a sudden, and it's been growing, obviously. Ukraine just blew up a Russian howitzer, and this is October 2021, in Donbass, in the disputed zone, using a drone they bought from Turkey. And as God is my witness, I thought turkeys could fly. Well, apparently, this is I can't stress what an enormous deal this is. Turkey, we often forget because they're very weird and kind of the no pun intended black sheep of the family in terms of the black sheep herder of the family, the sheep herder of black sheep, the herder of black sheep. Oh, I don't forget it. Of the NATO family, they're in NATO. So by doing this, a NATO nation is supplying offensive drones for the first time to Ukraine, and they are using them in the disputed territories. And if Ukraine has access to a lot of cheap drones and doesn't have to use a single soldier, and the only way Russia can claim land is by putting feet there, because you can't seize land just by bombing it and saying it's yours. You have to move soldiers in and hold the ground. Well, Ukraine already has it. So if they cross and all they have to effectively do is get air support from other NATO allies if they need it for just eyes on the ground, and then send drones in to kill them. This is so dumb. And so the idea that Russia is just going to stampede into Ukraine, that's why they're doing cyber attacks. It's why they're possibly having a false flag idea, so that it looks like they have a reason to have their soldiers there, and therefore when they kill their soldiers for crossing the line, it's an act of aggression by the country that's being attacked. But the real stuff that's going on is there's been this illusion for a very long time, largely because we've all watched too many Mission Impossible movies and endless numbers of the CIA caused every problem in the world movies, that somehow that if the Americans just would leave, all of these problems would go away. The world would become a peaceful place. If we didn't keep propping people up and knocking people down, we would, everything would even out. When in reality, just the American existence in Afghanistan alone was sticking corks in holes in this dam for a very long time. And now that we're out, the international pressure that China and Russia benefited from us taking the hit from is now on them. This is truly fascinating and a massive shift because, again, drones and the like are the future of warfare, whether we like it or not. And if Bernie Sanders had become president, I know a lot of his followers wouldn't like it, but if he had to do a military action, he would go drone strike all the way because for one simple reason, drones don't come home in flag draped coffins. That's why. 100%. The Chinese are sending robot machine guns into the disputed territory between them and India right now because they don't have the soldiers to waste and their soldiers won't go to fight. But this is going to be normalized in places. But again, that doesn't matter. You can send all the robots in you want, but robots aren't a claim to territory. People need to be there for you to say it's your land. And that's the problem Russia has right now. And we got to take a break. I went way over that, and there's so much to dive into that this is just fascinating. When we come back, you know, I want to talk a little bit more about how this complicates things for Russia and China because of the AUKUS agreement that Biden put in place that Trump could have but didn't. I'm going to just keep. It's the Midwestern goodbye habit that I have. We'll be back right after this. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Don't have as much time to talk during my segments because Devin's bumpers are 3 minutes long.
Want a quick promo, Hal? You got a quick promo, Hal.
Welcome back to the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide, Chicago's Press Talk, WCPT. Woo! Yeah!
I love it. Way better. And I feel like he leaves a lip on the counter every time he tries to get that out. Like it flies off. Lands like there's this. Is that a slug? No, my lip popped off because I was speaking too fast.
A slug.
Yeah. So this I'm fascinated with. I mean, obviously, this is the big clamor that everyone's going through. Russia's going to go into Ukraine and China's going to go in Taiwan. And then, oh my God, because they smell weakness and blood in the water and Biden's weak and yada, yada, yada. Meanwhile, Axios has this, let's see, a number of issues that that Russia is running into. That Russia had this idea that, let's see, that this was going to be relatively easy, and then actually China's adventurism into Taiwan actually, over the transiting the aerial zone north of it. No, by the way, no matter what Trump said, no bombers flew over Taiwan. They did not. It's just, I mean, it's silly to even assume so, but it's materially false. It's just ridiculous. It's just silly.
Nightmare.
Yeah, and it nowhere near what happened. There's like a tiny little corner up near the top, and they went, "Oh, I flew by your little zone. I flew over. Oh, we went by your zone." They actually flew over Japan's disputed islands, which was more of a transgression to the Japanese than Taiwan. And in this time, what happened? Because Russia was looking at this. Russia was like, okay, what's their reaction going to be like? What has happened in this situation? Well, Biden struck a deal with Australia, and the UK and the US are now providing them with nuclear-powered, not nuclear-armed, very distinct difference, powered submarines, which can run for weeks underwater. They are completely silent. They don't have engine noise like diesel ones. And they're very scary. And they go into the water, and the Chinese hate them, and they're very angry that the Australians now have them. And the Australians scuttled a giant highway project that the Chinese were doing through the Belt Road Initiative it seemed nice at the time, but turned out to be that the highway had all these, like, we're going to put traffic cams. Well, the traffic cams were pointed at the port where the military boats were docking. So they were like, oh, it's a spy road. They built a spy road. Okay, you can't build a spy road. Get out of here. Bite it. So they canceled it, and now the Japanese, the Indians, and the U.S. are docking at that port. And until such time as the Australians have their own nuclear-powered submarines to patrol silently, ours will dock there. And the Chinese are very upset. And we've been doing laps around Taiwan with the UK and the Japanese, basically in rotation. And our troops are on the ground there training Taiwanese troops. The Marines are there, basically saying if you're going to do everything, you have to cross a really big line. If we weren't there, it's a small line. Like, oh crap, look what they did while we were over here busy. But here we are. We're in the way. So to get to them, you have to go through us, and that's a much bigger step than just invading Taiwan and seizing it, and then doing what? Taking their chip industry. The blueprints for the chips and the creation of the chips all happens in Silicon Valley in the United States. They're manufactured there. But you don't automatically, the technology doesn't become magically yours because you seize the factory. These aren't like automobile factories in World War II that you can convert into tank factories. It doesn't work that way. And they keep thinking it does. So the AUKUS agreement, as soon as the Taiwanese issue came up, Biden formed the AUKUS agreement, started working again with the South Koreans and the Japanese And that's one of the reasons why North Korea fired this missile, was to give Beijing some cover. Of course, the rockets go up. They're testing these missiles. All of them land in the water. They never actually blow up. Isn't that interesting? Is it because we have a ship with a laser on it that can burn through the hull of a rocket parked 20 miles from there? Maybe. Anyways, so that's the fun part of it. But meanwhile, Russia's looking at this, and they're recognizing, and what happened after they started massing these troops. We formed meetings with NATO. We all got together. And a NATO country that's normally a little, rough around the edges and doesn't necessarily play well with its neighbors, all of a sudden is supplying drones, brand new, fresh fighter drones, meaning we don't have to lose a soldier to take some of yours or some of your gear. And, and all of a sudden this is happening. This part of it is this is a recognition that the stability of the world, and especially democracies, is on, the worm has turned with democracy. We are no longer on the run. And as much as some of these might be shaky democracies, including Kazakhstan, they still technically are. And the people there, just like the Iranians, would rather be able to pick their own leaders. Even if we don't like their leaders, that's tough. As long as they can freely choose those people, the tendency tends to be, more domestic support when you can pick your own leaders. When you can't, they take everything they can from the homeland or wherever they're, the region or the local tribes, and then they go after the next door neighbors. And that's what's happening in Turkey with Russia, because Turkey is looking at Russia with their $1.9 trillion GDP and going, we could swamp that in a couple of years because of where we are and because we have better friendships and we have more options as far as industry and stuff than Russia does. We're smaller. We don't have to cover a lot of territory. We don't have to worry about China on our back door the same way. We've got shipping lanes, fish. We got, they're way better off. So they've got this illusion that they could actually, if the USSR can come back, maybe the Ottoman Empire can come back, right? And that's what Erdogan thinks is going to happen. And now the Chinese and we've talked about the Chinese and the Indian fight on the disputed territory, but you'll recall the stories of the Chinese and the Indians beating the snot out of each other, literally in an area where you're not allowed to bring guns, beating each other to death, fist fights to the death over land, which is, so primal and weird in this day and age.
Sounds
and then in other
horrific.
areas, and the Chinese encroachment and the attempt to breed Tibetans out of existence that the Indians are pushing back on in this area has resulted in them putting, robot guns, these little tanks with a gun on them that are remote control in these regions. All of a sudden, and then boom goes Kazakhstan. Something we just didn't think about in this. And now on Russia's backdoor and on China's backdoor at the same time, you have instability in a country that enjoys a lot of resources, doesn't necessarily have to share them with anyone, could partner with Turkey, decide it, wants to become a member of NATO as well because of the entrance into the world banking system and being able to buy and sell goods without having to, give 40% to Vladimir Putin personally. That's intoxicating when you live in that part of the world, I'd imagine. And then again, 200,000 plus, 1.4% of the Kazakhstan population is Uyghurs, and they live on the border of China, about 150 miles from where China is exterminating Uyghurs and torturing them. And the only reason that they were busy, they weren't gearing up for more stuff, to deal with us was because that they were dealing with their alliances in Afghanistan all this time. Now that's done. Now what? So my question is, you think Russia and China are really laughing right now that America left Afghanistan in August and is no longer there? We'll be back right after this. It's the House Sparks radio program, mega worldwide. At home, it's COVID. And it's one particular voting bloc that's having a problem. We'll be back.